Welcome, Canada, and of course, the lawyers paid to watch this show to sue me now or in the future, or maybe in the past, depending on what we're talking about. How does time work? I'm not quite sure. Now, we have a great show for you tonight, with the ghost of SNC-Lavalin being our top story. People need to understand the story involving David Lametti trying to interfere in court justices. This is the red line. Canada's literally at the brink of becoming a dictatorship with this. We don't talk about this, but I'm going to explain how the ghost of SNC-Lavalin is the #1 threat to Canada right now. That's what I'm calling this scandal. Then, we're going to get into the real danger with the pandemic. You might know there's a pandemic going on, and you might think the danger of the pandemic is the disease, or people dying by coughing or whatever. No, 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 no. I have listened to the United Nations, and when has the United Nations ever been wrong? And I've discovered the real victim and the real culprit of the pandemic. Not the Chinese government, not Donald Trump, the patriarchy. Yes, really. Yes, really. Speaking of the United Nations, Erin O'Toole has decided to completely adopt the Paris Accords. And people are saying, don't worry, Stephen Harper said he's not going to meet the targets. Erin O'Toole's just trying to do this to throw off the media. Well, I have some information you're not going to like. Unless you don't like Erin O'Toole, in which case you're really going to like. And this is probably the show for you if you're not an O'Toole fan. Anyways, then we have lots of stuff to go over. We will have the Trump's banning of critical race theory, hopefully, if we have time for that. We have the conclusion of my investigation into gun crime in Toronto and the GTA. It's been a blast. Now, we also have good news on the front of Iran and Turkey. Mariam Shamnandari, I'm sorry if I butchered your name, she was let go. She was not going to be murdered by the Iranian regime. But the Islamic Republic of Iran and the Ayatollah are about to murder some very prominent people there for the crime of protesting, and we're going to try and stop them. So that's what you're in for in tonight's show. Strap in. Let's get started. All right. The biggest story in the country that, of course, will get barely any coverage because it requires people to explain and it's not even that complicated, all right? If you remember the SNC-Lavalin controversy, you might remember that I was the only one who actually explained what the controversy was about. The CBC and their cronies kept saying, oh, it's too complicated for Canadians. It really wasn't. And I also blamed Andrew Scheer and the Conservatives for completely fumbling that controversy. Okay, and I'll go into that, because what happened was, you remember Jody Wilson-Raybould, and she stood up to the Prime Minister of Canada, right? And she stood up to Justin Trudeau, and he fired her. And Andrew Scheer got up there and took some really bad advice from a lot of idiots, high-priced strategists, and he was saying things like, should we talk about the real issue and concern to the Canadians and their future, or should we use some gender studies talking points? And he was like, I don't know, gender studies talking points. Trudeau is sexist, and Trudeau is racist because he fired an Indigenous woman. That was not the story. That's a part of the story. That's an interesting side note, sure, but the real crisis of SNC-Lavalin was this, and the ghosts of this and the reverberations are still going on in Canadian society, and if we don't talk about it, and I guarantee you Erin O'Toole will not, we're gonna lose our democracy. If you remember SNC-Lavalin, what it was is Justin Trudeau took money from lobbyists. This is the SNC-Lavalin who had given illegal donations to the Liberal Party. They had to pay back. They also donated to the Trudeau Foundation. They lobbied Justin Trudeau to put a special law into our system for them, a special law. Now, this is called the Deferred Prosecution Agreement. That is in itself a big no-no, but the real controversy here is the destruction of our freedom and democracy. Let me explain. If you're a Canadian, you probably know a lot more about American politics. And the American political system is structured with three branches. You have the executive branch, which is the president. You have the legislative branch, which is the House and the Senate. And then you have the judiciary, which is the Supreme Court. This forms a balance of power. All of these different groups check each other, and you even have two branches within the legislature, all with different powers, right? The American system is designed for gridlock. It's designed to stop a bad leader from taking power. It's quite a brilliant system. Canada has one check. No checks, it's a check. And that is our judicial system. And because the way Canada works, if you break it down, our executive and our legislature are really rolled into one. We have a prime minister, but he also sits in the House of Commons and helps create laws. So unlike Trump, who doesn't create laws, he just has veto power over them, Trudeau helps create the laws in the legislature. We also have a Canadian Senate. However, the Canadian Senate is a purely cosmetic thing. It's less useful than, I don't know, like my grandmother has more power in Canadian politics than the Canadian Senate. We need to reform the Senate. Moving on, which means the only check and balance, don't worry, the media will do, the media, is the judicial system. It's the judicial system, which is why there's such a strong bulwark and such a big prohibition on the Prime Minister and the PMO interfering in judicial matters, because it is the one check and balance we have in our democracy. We have one, just one. So what SNC-Lavalin was, right? Stephen Harper, peace and blessings be upon him, had some foresight, great foresight. And he set up an independent prosecutor's office. And the role of the independent prosecutor would be they would have to decide, and they'd be independent from the government on certain important legal matters, like SNC-Lavalin. So when Justin Trudeau took money from lobbyists to create a special law to help them get off the hook for their misdeeds in Libya, by the way, if SNC-Lavalin was found guilty of a felony, they wouldn't be able to bid on government contracts for 10 years. They were found guilty of a penalty, but they still found a way around it. But that's not the real story that we need to focus on. The real problem is, the independent prosecutor said SNC-Lavalin did not qualify for the DPA. So Justin Trudeau put pressure, and many other people, Gerald Butts, Katie Telford, what's his face, the independent bureaucrat, I can't remember his name right now, they all put pressure on Jody Wilson-Raybould to try and get her to change her decision. Jody Wilson-Raybould had something, if you're in the Liberal Party, you might not understand this. It's called principles. Jody Wilson-Raybould had principles, same with Jane Philpott, and they were ejected from the Liberal Party because principles not allowed. So good for Jody Wilson-Raybould, good for Jane Philpott. They stood up for actual Canadian values and tried to protect our democracy. Justin Trudeau was having none of that. So David Lametti was put in because David Lametti was a stooge. Now we can go further into SNC-Lavalin, but let's go into the ghost of SNC-Lavalin, today's controversy. Let's bring up this story. Federal Attorney General Lametti interfered in court business judge. Now let's read this article, because you have to, I'm telling you, this is the thin line. And the Attorney General, the one man who's supposed to walk this thin line, is an absolute Trudeau puppet and helping him to basically ruin the country. There'd be no difference in the powers of Trudeau versus the Ayatollah if him and Lametti get their way. The Federal Court of Appeal has found Attorney General David Lametti unlawfully interfered in court business. That's not good. According to Blacklock's report, the court cited Lametti after striking down a cabinet bill introduced 3 months ago to freeze civil proceedings. Yeah, just freezing civil proceedings, nothing big here. The bill would have allowed the Justice Department, quote, unilaterally interfere in legal proceedings. That's crazy. It is incorrect in law and should not be followed, Justice Mark Knoll wrote. Good on Justice Mark Knoll. High five. Introduced in June 10th, Bill C-17 would allow changes to Canadian emergency subsidy ways and curb. It also introduced the Term Limits and Other Periods Act, which overrule court orders by suspending ordinary civil deadlines in civil proceedings at tax court and other federal court business in 6 months. This is Lametti's excuse. Due to current COVID-19 pandemic, there's a risk that many will be unable to meet numerous time limits, Lametti wrote in an explanatory note, but Knoll rejected that reasoning because the bill would ultimately benefit the Department of Justice. Court orders or decisions when made are law until set aside, wrote Knoll. That rule is absolute. Okay, let's break this down. Here we have Justin Trudeau using the excuse of COVID-19 to seize dictatorial power, and thrown into bills where free money from CURB, yay, it rains $2,000 a month. What could go wrong? Is anyone really surprised that in the Free Money Act, he tried to sneak in another part of the bill that would give him unlimited power to unilaterally interfere in all civil proceedings? Again, the Prime Minister of Canada would be able to go into any civil court proceedings. Let's say the case of, I don't know, Walid Suleiman versus Daniel Bordman, and just say, no, this is what Justin Trudeau says. Who cares what the law says? Justin Trudeau, whee! Does that sound like a democracy? Honestly, does this sound like a functioning democracy? You have a prime minister who sits in the legislature, he makes laws, right? He now will control the courts, civil court proceedings, any court proceeding. He could just decide how it goes, interfere, decide what evidence is not, what is and isn't. Like how do you stop that? Is this, Iranida? Like, come on. And I mean, David Lametti is an absolute joke, an authoritarian joke. I'm telling you, good on Post Media for covering this, good on The Sun. There's a few articles a week, but what drives me crazy, how is this not like 24 hours? Okay, let's just imagine Donald Trump did this. Imagine, guys, imagine how ballistic the CBC would go. Just imagine how crazy the CBC would go, and Global News and CTV, if Donald Trump tried to pass a law saying, because of COVID-19, Donald Trump should have the power to unilaterally interfere in any civil court proceeding across the country. Donald Trump could just sign an executive order and throw evidence out of different courts. Does that sound like something the CBC would just say, oh, ho-hum, well, I guess he got caught. Oopsie doodles, shouldn't do that. Judge said no to David Lametti. Haha. Imagine Donald Trump and William Barr tried to push forward a law that would give them unilateral power to interfere in any civil court proceeding. Just imagine that. Imagine how crazy the CBC would go, and CNN. Imagine how crazy they'd go, and then cross-reference that with how, hey, Trudeau did this. Here's one article. That's the Canadian press on Justin Trudeau. That is insane. That's insane, and I hate this stuff. And listen, I've been consistent on all of this. All politicians in many different countries have tried to use this power. I went ballistic when Doug Ford tried to seize power with Bill 195, and Belinda Carr-Harris stood up to him, and I stood with Belinda Carr-Harris, and I still do. Right? Just because there's a pandemic doesn't mean you're going to be dictator of Canada, or dictator of Ontario, or dictator of Brazil, or dictator of Venezuela, or, well, there's already a dictator of Venezuela, dictator of Italy. Like, we're insert country, province, region here. You don't get to become king of the world just because there's a pandemic. Speaking of pandemics and things I love, things that are on the same moral equivalency, pandemics and the United Nations. So why not bring in the United Nations to explain this pandemic? All right, let's just bring this stuff up. And everyone knows here that I love the United Nations. So the United Nations has decided to step into the fray here. Can we get the United Nations tweet on the pandemic, please, and how the real problem? Yes, as you see here, we have learned through centuries that the real problem and the real cause of the pandemic is the patriarchy. Yes, the pandemic has shown us that the patriarchy is harming women, boys, girls, children, everyone. Everyone's hurt by the patriarchy. The patriarchy ate a bunch of bats in Wuhan, and we've all been dying ever since. Okay. Now, I'm just hoping my head doesn't explode. So I'm taking a deep breath here. Because I'm trying, guys. I really promised. We're at a family show, guys. This show, we love families. You have a family. I support your family. No swear words, Daniel. But the United Nations saying that the pandemic has shown us this patriarchy. I mean, how does anyone take this thing seriously? The United Nations. What is the United Nations even good at? Let not be said the United Nations is good for nothing. Let me just take a look here. And okay, so United Nations, some people say it's good for nothing. It's really good at enabling war criminals. Okay, so if you're a war criminal, that's pretty sweet. All right, let's look at the Human Rights Tribunal. On the Human Rights Tribunal, there's only 2 countries with active slave markets in the world. That's Libya and Mauritania. They wouldn't be on the UN Human Rights Commission. Oh, they're both on the UN Human Rights Commission? Okay, so they're really good at slavery. By the way, if anyone wants an African slave for about $200, you can just go to Libya, and the slave markets there are run by Muslim Brotherhood members with connections to Erdogan's Turkey. So if you want to just buy a slave, feel free to contact the United Nations Human Rights Council, and they should be able to set you up with Human Rights Council members, Mauritania and Libya, so you can buy a slave. And by the way, it is racial African chattel slavery, so it is specifically the enslavement of black Africans being sold at active slave markets by UN human rights members, Libya and Mauritania. What else is the United Nations good at? I see they ran a pretty active pedophile ring out of Haiti. So, you know, if you really like pedophile rings, you can give money to the United Nations. That's another thing they're good at. Oh, they really don't like Jews. Israel is bad. Okay, so if you don't like Jews, but you like pedophiles, war criminals, and slavery, the United Nations seems like a great place. What else do they do? Nikki Haley left, so there's really nothing good there. Yeah, that's the United Nations there. So I've had a proposal for a few years now that what should we do with the United Nations? We should physically dig the United Nations out of New York, transport it and all the diplomats there, and move them to North Korea where they belong. Because why do we still, why are we taking orders from this stupid, evil organization? Okay? And there's so many rants we can go on. We could do the globalism versus globalist thing, right? You know, globalization versus globalism, right? Globalization is international trade. I think Canada should have free trade with Japan, whatever. Globalization. Globalism is the United Nations should tell Canada and Japan how they should trade. Evil. Stupid as well. So I say there could be a need for the United Nations. Okay? And I've said, okay, the function of the United Nations could be just a room. If the United Nations is just a room for diplomats from Canada to talk to Haitian diplomats or Venezuelan diplomats or Belarusian diplomats or Russian diplomats or Japanese, Chinese, Korean, you know, if it's just a place for people to meet and diplomats to concur and streamline international relations, fine. Now we have the internet, so we don't even need a room for that anymore, but fine, you can have a room. But all this type of stuff, like Canada and Justin Trudeau just gave another up to $110 million to UNRWA, the United Nations, Death to the Jews Association. And I've shown on the show before how UNRWA supports terrorism and Hamas. Oh, another thing the United Nations is good at, supporting terrorism. So again, if you like terrorism, pedophilia, war crimes, literal slavery, and you hate Jews, the United Nations is a great place for you. If you like anything that isn't that, we should probably defund that thing ASAP. Okay. I want to get into patriarchy. It's the patriarchy that causes, if we've learned anything. I tried to even mock. I was trying to think of jokes that we could mock the United Nations. Like, how could this be patriarchy? Did men start the virus, or it's like I couldn't even think of where their logic was going. I couldn't even think. It's just intersectional word salad. That's what the United Nations is now. It hurts Daniel's brain, makes thinking hard. Okay. Speaking of the United Nations and people who love the United Nations, Erin O'Toole. Now, Erin O'Toole, or the Tool, as he's known by his friends, is a globalist shill, according to me, and a lot of people. And listen, again, I don't like stupid criticism of the Conservative Party and Andrew Scheer and Erin O'Toole. They're the same as Trudeau. No, he's not the same as Trudeau. However, he is pro-carbon tax. He is a green energy puppet. He is not acting in the best interests of Canadian energy. He never have, and he never will, and we'll get into why soon. So the defense of Erin O'Toole, and I think, listen, I don't think anyone offering up this defense is at all out of bounds because they sort of don't know what I know, but I'll connect some dots for you. The defense of Erin O'Toole here is, well, Stephen Harper also signed on to these 2020, 2030 commitments. He just never met them, but he said them to sort of placate the media and the left so they'd leave him alone so he could govern more effectively and not have to fight silly battles with the media. Fair enough, and that very well might be Erin O'Toole's position. I doubt it, but fair enough. I'm going to acknowledge that as a legitimate defense. However, Erin O'Toole is getting up there saying he has a Canada first. He's going to be Canada first. And this is why I hate it. Listen, Erin O'Toole's campaign is suing my family for frivolous nonsense for reporting their campaign. So I have no love for Erin O'Toole and friends, all right? But taking my personal, please stop suing my family, you jackasses, views aside, this is why I don't like Erin O'Toole. It's because he gets up and he says, Canada first. I'm the Canada first guy. I'm the true blue conservative. And he's sullying and poisoning the name that is conservatism as a phony conservative, and really he's a hardcore red Tory, maybe even fluorescent pink Tory. If we have to have a new category of like Patrick Brown level fluorescent pink Tory, and we'll get into Patrick Brown very soon. So O'Toole said he's going to 100% commit to the Paris Climate Accords, which is the United Nations. So an interesting Canada First policy. Erin O'Toole's Canada First policy involves having sovereignty on our energy issues dictated by the United Nations. I don't know how that constitutes Canada First, but what he's doing is he's poisoning the name Canada First because he's burning up its relevancy, right? So a real conservative politician, right? If we got Derek Sloan in, and Derek Sloan said, hey, we're going to be Canada first, which means we're going to let Canadians dictate energy policy, which means in the West, we're going to let the West, we're going to repeal Bill C-69, Bill C-48. These are destroying Alberta's economy. We must stand with Alberta. And personal belief of Daniel, we must stand with Alberta and do all of that. There's so much more. Equalization payments. Listen, I know if you're an Albertan right now, you're screaming at the wall. I want to be going as crazy as you are in Alberta. So I know just talking about this stuff, you're an Albertan, and please continue to throw things, flip things around. If you need to pause the video just to yell, just know your yelling is what I'm doing in my head when I'm thinking of this, and I don't even live in Alberta. So sympathies go to you. But Erin O'Toole has thrown you under the bus under the guise of Canada first. So he's going to get he's just saying Canada first to rile up the base, kind of, and people think, oh, he'll be Canada first because he's somewhat taking on the left. But he's not taking on the left on any substantive issue. He's just sort of burning that social capital so no one behind him can use it, and then doing all the bidding of the radical left anyway. So Erin O'Toole is not to be trusted on any issue regarding to energy. And I said this in the debate. I agreed with his CANSUC policy on trade. I thought Erin O'Toole was the furthest left of all the candidates on energy, and he is. So let's meet the man behind Erin O'Toole's green energy program, Mr. Dan Robertson. Let's bring him up. So here's Dan Robertson. Now, Dan Robertson is also in the category of people that are 100% getting subpoenaed if Waleed and Camp are dumb enough to take me to trial. So let's bring up Dan Robertson, please. This is Erin O'Toole's head of carbon tax. Now, Dan Robertson, how do we know him? And you see, he's a director of strategy. I'm part of Erin O'Toole, director of strategy is Team O'Toole right now. This is from today. Why are we talking about Dan Robertson right now? Well, good friend of the show, Patrick Brown. Now, Patrick Brown wrote a book about what happened to him. If you remember, Patrick Brown was a complete coward, a red Tory, and everyone ditched him, and it was kind of funny, but it was also a horrible fake Me Too accusation that, listen, no one liked Patrick Brown, especially Patrick Brown and me. But what happened to him was totally, wholly unethical. Dan Robertson was one of those people behind that. Now, in Patrick Brown's book, Patrick Brown says Dan Robertson, who is currently on the O'Toole team, was the man who advised him to throw the social conservatives under the bus. If you're a SoCon in Ontario, you remember how Patrick Brown campaigned that he was one of you guys? He was really a social conservative on all these different issues. Even though he had a history of being a red Tory, he lied to your face. And then Dan Robertson, according to Patrick Brown, was the man who advised him to throw you guys under the bus. So, religious Christians who thought Patrick Brown would stand with you on all the different issues that he lied to your face about. Sorry about that. Lightning struck the studio, sent by Justin Trudeau. So we're getting into, as we said, Dan Robertson, a fellow Dan. And we have a man here who Patrick Brown alleges in his own book was the one who told, Dan Robertson was the one who told Patrick Brown to throw the social conservatives and the Christian community under the bus. Got to drive that bus over them, Patrick, according to Patrick Brown. And he was also the one who pushed Patrick Brown to adopt the carbon tax. Dan Robertson is a hardcore pro-carbon tax activist. Very big carbon tax guy. Now, you might say, okay, just because Erin O'Toole hired the guy from Patrick Brown's campaign who wanted to advocate for the carbon tax, then promoted him to a senior strategies role where he openly advocates for the carbon tax, doesn't mean Erin O'Toole is in favor of the carbon tax. Well, it would be interesting. It would be so interesting, hypothetically, of course, Erin O'Toole, Dan Robertson, and Patrick Brown. Wouldn't it be interesting if Patrick Brown had sent text messages to Erin O'Toole saying, good job on all your stuff. And Erin O'Toole, it would be very interesting if Erin O'Toole ever responded to Patrick Brown's text messages saying that he really admired what Patrick Brown did and that he really admired that Patrick Brown pushed forward the carbon tax because it made it better and simpler for people behind him to do it. That'd be very interesting if those text messages ever existed. It would also be very interesting if people within the McKay campaign had let that leak to little old me, Now, of course, McKay didn't leak it because they, of course, wanted to push forward a carbon tax if they got elected as well, because Patrick Brown was on their side as well. But wouldn't it be fun if someone out there had the power, because let's just say someone inside Erin O'Toole's campaign, a senior member, was dumb enough to sue him and take him to court for defamation. That's me. That would give me the ability to subpoena these idiots. Oh, Dan Robertson, you're gonna get a subpoena. Patrick Brown, you're gonna get a subpoena. Erin O'Toole, you're gonna get like 50,000 subpoenas. I'm literally gonna pick you up and drag you into the courtroom to put you under oath. Everyone's getting subpoenaed. Subpoenas for all. Like, if you think you could be like, oh, I'm on Erin O'Toole's team. Jeffrey Crocker, you're getting subpoenaed. Jeff Ballingall, you're getting subpoenaed. Hey, hypothetically, does anyone know how Ontario Proud got a lot of money? Would it be interesting to find out under oath if Dan Robertson, Patrick Brown, and Walid Suleiman directed major donors of the Federal Conservative Party to give donations to Ontario Proud once they reach their maximum donation limit to the party? Would that be an interesting fact to know? Who knows? But we can find out how by subpoenaing all these idiots. Guys, I tried to warn you. I really tried to warn you not to mess with me because I knew what was going on. I tried to warn you, and your response was, hey, let's launch a frivolous lawsuit against his family. That ought to show how nice we are. You messed up. So, if you want to go to court and you want to go under oath and explain, why did Ontario Proud never talk about the carbon tax? They really hated Kathleen Wynne. Grrr, Kathleen Wynne, grrr. But they never really went after the carbon tax. That's an interesting little puzzle. That's a very interesting puzzle. Now, if you want to know the answers to that and get them under oath, you can donate to my legal defense fund, because we're going to give subpoenas to every one of these red Tories who are involved in all this nonsense. So, as I said before, if you're a major player within Erin O'Toole's campaign and your ideas are, let's sue that kid, what's the worst that can happen? I will drag all of you into court. I don't care. I don't care about money. I really don't care about, I will give all my life savings because I find this, 1, necessary, 2, patriotic, 3, a little hilarious. I'll bring you all into court and I'll make you answer these questions under oath. I will do it. I'll do it. I would say don't test me, but I'm at the point where it's like, guys, can you do me a favor? Please test me. There's so much we're going to find out in the next few months. I can't wait. I can't wait. Can we get, there should be a gift. Can't wait. All right. Now, a bit of a side break. We're going to do a sponsor of the show. They're actually not paying us any money. I just want to sort of support a good cause here. So we're going to play a video here. We'll call this a commercial break. Thank you to Ben Bankus and Rebel Media. So right now, this Friday, every Friday, by the way, this Friday I'll be doing this show. I'll be doing some stand-up in the park, but this is the Freedom of Comedy protest. So if you want to support freedom of speech and the attack by the radical left and the police state on our freedom of expression, please support this. So let's just run this video from Rebel Media and Ben Bankus.
But Ben, you know what? Here's what I want to propose to you. I feel as you do. I'm not into cancel culture. I'm not into the idea of people voluntarily gathering in a park to hear some comedians give them some much needed fodder to laugh about during these dark days of the pandemic. So we want to start a petition based on your experience. It's called letaslaugh.com. That's letaslaugh.com. I want people to go to this petition, sign their names, take a stand for comedy in the park, because God knows everything from violent protests to homeless encampments are happening in the park. And when we get a significant number of signatures, we'll deliver this to bylaw ourselves. What do you think about that offer, Ben?
I think that's a great offer. I appreciate you guys. And, you're pretty much the only media that's sticking up for me, the cause, for comedy, and I think that there's a lot more at stake than people realize. If we go back into lockdown, the Canadian comedy industry is going to be screwed, even more so than they already are.
Yeah, and I mean, the days are getting shorter, the weather's getting chillier. You have a certain window in which to do these performances, but we just think when it comes to bylaw officers, when it comes to politically correct woke comedians embracing cancel culture, enough is enough. Like I said, folks, if you support Ben and his crew of comedians in spreading a little laugh to the city, please go to letaslaugh.com, put your signature there, and like I said, we'll deliver it to the proper authorities once we get several thousand.
All right, so that was, thank you, Rebel Media, Ben Bankus. That is the show in the park. If you want to support Ben and sign the petition, the link is in the description of this video below. If you want to know where the show is, you got to follow Ben on social media. Do his Instagram or Twitter. It's at Ben Bankus, BenBankas. And if you want to go watch the show this Friday, I'll be telling some jokes there. So if you like my face, if you like my rambling, if you want something from me a little less serious, go to the park. Because again, as the Rebel said, we don't have a lot of time left for comedy in the park as the days are getting shorter and colder. So if you want to see these shows, if you want to support the freedom of comedy protest, if you want to push back against cancel culture, and the fact that there are even like some crazy woken mic comedians who are trying to cancel the show, please at least sign the petition. If you want to go see the show, message Ben Bankus on social media. Follow him because he's doing great work. All right, let us talk about a major international story we have coming up, where we have the Islamic Republic of Iran, a country that I am not a fan of. They are set to straight up murder someone. Wrestler Ashkan Shefari, his name is in the description, and you can spell it out it's Navid Afkari. I'm sorry, I'm butchering his name, but he's going to die. Now, I'm going to give you some hope, okay? If we saw the video from yesterday and the Twitter post I made, and if you saw it, Miriam Shamrandari, right? She was set to be murdered by the Islamic Republic, and here he is. So he's a very popular 27-year-old wrestler, and his crime is protesting. And the Ayatollah, who is one of the worst human beings on the planet, is out there on Twitter, and Twitter still lets this piece of human garbage on their site. By the way, Twitter's blocked in Iran, but this human garbage pile, known as the Ayatollah, gets to get on Twitter and spew absolute nonsense. Theocratic, Islamo-fascist nonsense. And the Ayatollah's up there saying Donald Trump needs to respect the Black Lives Matter protesters. In his country, he murders people who protest. He's going to murder this young man. His crime is protesting, and him and others are set to be killed, executed, for the crime of protesting for freedom. And this is one of the tragedies of the coronavirus. There was a lot of progress being made in Hong Kong and Iran, where people were on the streets demanding their freedom, and it all got shut down by the coronavirus, or the patriarchy, as we learned from the UN. If there's enough international pressure, we can stop this. There is only one world leader who has taken this man's cause, and it's Donald Trump. Donald Trump is the only world leader with the spine and the moral conviction to say murdering people for protesting is wrong. Call it execution. Iran executes the most people per capita in the world. So you want to hear a story, just Iran 101? My former business partner from Civil Space, Sia Sufi, Sia once told me a story when he was in prison in Iran. Now, he was put in prison because he organized a protest. He was part of a student club, a student union. I know, a criminal thing, being part of a student union and wanting freedom and women's rights and such. I know, the horror. So he was a political prisoner. He was in jail for a few months, and one of his cellmates in jail was a 16-year-old boy on death row. By the way, Iran also executes the most children in the world. This 16-year-old boy's crime, well, he was a repeat offender. His crime, and he was convicted of this 3 times, which is why he's going to die, was being Baha'i. Yeah, that's a crime in Iran. It's blasphemy. You're not allowed to be the religion which is Baha'ism. Now, I mean, what is Baha'ism? It's a little more complicated than this, but it's sort of a offshoot of Islam. It's way more moderate, way more peaceful. And the Baha'i religion is a death sentence. A 16-year-old kid was being sentenced to death for being Baha'i. It's, for the Baha'is in Iran, I hate Holocaust comparisons, but Jews in 1930s, Germany, it's an apt comparison. It's an apt comparison. They were going to murder, they murdered them just for existing. And they call it execution and blasphemy laws. And then these piles of human garbage, again, I'm trying not to swear because we're a family show for the Ayatollah. They get up there and they go, oh, America is so evil, the great Satan, America. And then they murder Navid. They were going to murder my friend Navid just for the crime of protesting. And they don't care. And this is how they operate, because they're Islamo-fascist thugs. They won't, and the reason why Iran is so dangerous is because they're not crazy, right? They're not going to do what Bashar al-Assad did. Bashar al-Assad in Syria, they just started murdering everyone and opening fire into the protests, right? And then people realized, okay, it's either death or liberty. And they started to fight up. They're like, if I stand up, I'm going all the way. What Iran will do is they'll kill a few. They'll pick this guy off and make a few examples. So you might die if you protest, but it's not 100%. It's a much more sophisticated and evil system in Iran. So that's what we're doing. All right. Bless this studio. I would like to say this studio has no affiliations to the Islamic Republic of Iran. That is not what we do. So the reason I bring this up, one, is because I hate the Ayatollah. Two, this has to do with, Turkey, right? Because we talked about Turkey earlier in the week, right? And how they're enabling this behavior because they're going to more Muslim Brotherhood, Islamo-fascist governance. But if we go to story number one, which is David Lametti, don't take this democracy for granted, okay? We have one red line. You think the media is going to stand up for democracy? Please. We have one red line. It's the judiciary here, right? Justin Trudeau tried to use COVID-19 and CURB as an excuse to interfere in any civil court proceedings, basically become the Ayatollah and decide who can live and die. I'm telling you, if you don't stand up and fight for this democracy, you're going to lose it. You're going to lose it. Because Iran, look at pictures of Iran in the 70s. Look at how great Persian civilization was. Cyrus the Great, first human rights charter in human history, Cyrus the Great. World's biggest Zionist, helped return the Jews to Israel. Great man. Literally one of the few people in history who deserved the great after his name. Probably the most deserving. His son Darius, also pretty great. The idea of federalism really came out of Persia and governance. It's a great civilization. It was a great civilization until the Ayatollahs got in and ruined it. I mean, even the Ayatollahs have said that Iranian history starts in 1978. So according to the Islamo-fascists running Iran, Cyrus the Great, Darius, Xerxes, the Persian Empire has nothing to do with Persian history. It's all Ayatollah all the time, and it's disgusting. It is... I hate it. Okay, I hate it. Now, moving on, let's bring up another sponsor of this show because I find this story hilarious. This show is sponsored by the Palestinians. Palestinians. Oh, what a hilarious clan they are. Now, the Palestinians are currently going crazy over the UAE, but this is by far the funniest and most Palestinian Palestine that's ever Palestined, okay? Now, we can go over to how, the Palestinians is a stupid term and they're not even real, but this is even better. So this is Hebron. So here's a story where Palestinian leaders call disabled access war crime and incite a third intifada. Okay, let's just break this down. Okay, so what you need to know is the tombs of the matriarchs and patriarchs, so the founding fathers of monotheism, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and their wives, Sarah, Leah, Rebecca, right? The tombs of the matriarchs and patriarchs, that's in Hebron. It's like the second holiest city in Judaism, and the United Nations says the tomb of the patriarchs and matriarchs, where the founding fathers of Judaism are buried, is a Palestinian heritage site. And by the way, Islam doesn't believe Isaac, they say Ishmael was. So it has even no connection to Islam, right? Because Islam says Abraham, but then goes Ishmael instead of Isaac. That's where they branch off between Christianity, Judaism versus Islam there. My decision, be a bigger fan of Ishmael than Isaac. I don't care. But I just find it funny that this is a Palestinian heritage site. Now, what did the Israelis do that is a war crime? They built a wheelchair ramp. That's right. The fact that disabled people will now be allowed to visit the tomb of the matriarchs and patriarchs is a war crime. And the Palestinian leaders have called for a third intifada. An intifada is like a terrorist uprising. The second one was in 2000, and then they just went kaboom, kaboom, kaboom. I know people who died in those terrorist attacks, but still, the Palestinians just went boom. So just to recap, the Palestinians want you to know that if you're disabled and you're going to visit the tomb of the founding fathers and mothers of Judaism and Christianity, that is a war crime, according to the Palestinians. Oh my God, what an amazing group of people they are. I long to live in a world, and it's coming soon because they're just going crazy, UAE, and Saudi Arabia is about to make peace with Israel, and so is Bahrain and Oman. I long to live in a world where we can see the Palestinian leadership get up and say, we want to kill Jews, slit their throats, murder them. What we mean by that is die, 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 kill, 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 murder, 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 murder. We hate Jews. We hate them. We hate them. We hate them. Kill, 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 boom, 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 murder, 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 murder. And then people go, wait, what the hell did they just talk about? Wait, kill, murder? That's bad. Instead of, well, they're really sad and oppressed, and it's more complicated. And you got to talk about occupation and blah 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 blah. That's my imitation of Justin Trudeau and his followers when it comes to geopolitics. And I do have an official statement from Foreign Affairs Minister Francois Champlain on the issue of the Palestinians killing, and he does say, quote, so if you're wondering, that is the official stance from the left on the Palestinians being crazy. All righty then. Let's bring up the results of my thorough investigation into gun crime. So I put out this poll on Twitter because I was contracted by Justin Trudeau, John Tory, and Patrick Brown. As you see, with the 2 a.m. drive-by shooting in Toronto and the shooting in Brampton Cemetery, I have been hired by Justin Trudeau, John Tory, and Patrick Brown to figure out the cause of these crimes. I have narrowed it down to 4 possible options. Who do you think it is? And thank you to the 2,756 people who helped me with this results. It was either hunters, legal gun collectors, Stephen Harper, or gang members. Now, 76.7% of you said it was gang members. So we can please take this off the screen. That means 76.7% of you are clearly stupid because Justin Trudeau says nuh-uh, and John Tory disagrees. In fact, we do know because, listen, why else would Justin Trudeau target legal gun collectors and random duck hunters with his gun laws, insinuating that that was the reason why gun crime was spiking? Why else? Are you telling me that Justin Trudeau could be wrong? Is that even possible? Or Justin Trudeau could be lying for political purposes? Justin Trudeau, dreamy face, Rick Dreamy Eyes, could be lying? Impossible. Which means 76.7% of my followers are fake news. Russian bots, hijacked or paid by Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin to undermine our democracy. Undermined. Okay? I mean, who would conduct a gang member doing a 2 a.m. shootout into a bakery? Hello, that sounds ridiculous. Clearly, those were a bunch of gun hunters hopped up on dope. Wait, no, marijuana's a good thing. Clearly, that was a bunch of gun hunters who didn't smoke enough marijuana, who just went around and they thought, because they weren't high on marijuana, that a random bakery with pedestrians in it were a bunch of ducks, and they started shooting. And I have it on good authority that they were supplied by legal gun collectors. Now, people are saying crazy things like, Daniel, clearly most of the guns coming in are smuggled in by gangs through the American border. Hello, it's all illegal guns. Very rarely is a legal gun used in a crime, almost never. And to that I say, la 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 la. So, to recap, duck hunters found themselves in a cemetery or a drive-by shooting, and they got confused because of the lack of marijuana they were on. Had they been smoking more marijuana, they probably would have been in a more calm state of mind. So, They then started shooting a bunch of pedestrians in a bakery in Little Jamaica, and then after that, they went into a Brampton cemetery, got even more confused, and started shooting at each other, and 3 people were injured. Now you're saying, Daniel, who was behind this, obviously Stephen Harper. Okay, that's why people are saying Stephen Harper because they're clever, because as Justin Trudeau says, it's Stephen Harper's fault. So we have Stephen Harper, the mastermind of all this gun crime. Okay, so Stephen Harper's here, and he's rubbing his hands together, and he's cackling maniacally, and he's directing, through proxies, the legal gun collectors. Now, the legal gun collectors, I'm not sure if they're actual gun collectors or if they're also Russian Facebook bots. This I don't know yet. So they're either real people or Russian Facebook bots. Let's just go with the more logical thing, and they're Russian Facebook bots. So Stephen Harper is using a bunch of Russian Facebook bots who have guns permits bought legally. They're then supplying those guns and ammunition to the duck hunters, who are then using that to go and create chaos because they're not high on marijuana. So they don't know the difference between the forest and Little Jamaica. Does that make sense? Good. I'm glad. By the way, the taxpayer paid $50 million for me to conduct that study. And I blew it all. You're welcome. Okay, now to moving on to something even more ridiculous than what I just said, critical race theory. The enemy of critical thinking. Donald Trump, peace and blessings be upon him, decided to ban critical race theory. What a champ. What an absolute champ. What a great thing to do. Now, critical race theory, let's explain this. I hate racism, anti-Semitism, all that. You know, if you are a follower of Martin Luther King, I have a dream where all men and women are treated equally. That is the antithesis of critical race theory. Critical race theory is literally what we think of when you think of postmodern neo-Marxism. So critical theory, it says even in the description, it is an offshoot of Marxist thought taught in the Frankfurt School. So the Frankfurt School is sort of this, is the home of all of our current bad ideas. Now, I said this last week and I'm going to say it again. People who say things like, oh, complaining about the Frankfurt School is dog whistling for anti-Semitism. No, it's not. This is also an anti-Jewish ideology. Now, granted, a lot of the people who were big in the Frankfurt School were Jewish. Yeah, okay. I'm Jewish. I hate it. They're Jewish. They're like, not everyone. It is not a Jewish idea, right? And I'd argue it's an anti-Jewish idea. And anyone who tells you you're anti-Semitic for criticizing critical theory or the Frankfurt School, they probably, just ask them what they think about Jewish rights to their indigenous homeland. I guarantee you some anti-Semitism will come out. I guarantee you anyone who calls you an anti-Semite, or I'll guarantee you 90% of the people who will call you an anti-Semite for criticizing critical race theory and the Frankfurt School in themselves hold wildly anti-Semitic views. I've talked to them, I know this. So keep doing what you're doing, okay? Don't give in to that. Even if B'nai B'rith or Sija, tell them to go, I can't swear, but you know what to go to tell them to do. Okay, you tell them, they'll go. So what it is critical race theory. It's the postmodern neo-Marxism it's race war instead of class war. Okay, so Marx had the failed ideology, and one of Marx's biggest weaknesses, and this is a major weakness at 18th century, 19th century thinking, is misunderstanding evolution and Darwinism. Okay, so when the theory of evolution first started to get popularity, people sort of misinterpreted adaptability and the sort of cause of, or the end goal of evolution, let's say. So evolutionary theory says, the strongest will survive, and traits that are adaptable and help you adapt will be selected for and therefore propagated into the gene pool. Marx's biggest mistake is he thought that evolution was that we're genetically working towards a perfect state, right? Things will evolve. That's not how evolution is, right? It's not things get better, it's things get more adaptable. So he applied or misapplied evolutionary theory to economics. He also lived in Hegel's basement and never had a job in his life. Shocking. Right, so that was one of his big things. And Marx's class theory is, one, he had the proletariat and the bourgeoisie. Now, people think that, like, Bill Gates is the bourgeoisie. No, he was like the aristocracy. The bourgeoisie are really the people. They're the biggest problem to the communists. Small business owner are bourgeoisie, like a carpenter or a nurse. The middle class, that's bourgeoisie, because they have the money to not be living paycheck to paycheck, but they also have the freedom to make a better life. And people who want and have the freedom to improve their lives are the enemy of a utopia, because how can you improve on perfection? This is why Marx and Lenin are very, very big on hating the bourgeoisie, and they've tried to remarket the bourgeoisie as like Bill Gates, but the bourgeoisie is probably you, right? If you're not living paycheck to paycheck, I mean, throw COVID out of it, but if you weren't living paycheck to paycheck and you're not super wealthy, you're the bourgeoisie, you're the people that the communists hate the most. So this is how they did class distinction. They said, blah, 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 and the class warfare and the bourgeoisie are against the proletariat. And that was nonsense. It's zero-sum thinking, and I hate zero-sum thinking. If I have a store with merchandise, I think the couple of shirts would be, life is not a zero-sum game, and also industrial recycling is stupid and we need to end it. Something about industrial recycling. I'm about to rant about industrial recycling. I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to do it. Stay on topic, Daniel. So the critical race theory, though, is it takes all the failed Marxist theory and it puts it into race. So instead of the zero-sum game between between bourgeoisie and proletariat, it says blacks and whites. So then it takes this failed economic theory and it applies it to race relations. And if you wonder why things are going awry, it's because of this. And it's absolute garbage. It talks about taking down the Western civilization. It's anti-Western. And listen, I don't think you should make it illegal to teach it, but you shouldn't be funding it. And that's what we are. We should not fund ideas that are against Western civilization. It's a crazy thing to do, and good on Donald Trump for ending it. And I hope I hope Erin O'Toole, I hope someone does the same thing in Canada, please. For the love of all that is holy, can we just do that? So thank you so much to everyone who watched this week's show. Hopefully the power stays on long enough to end this. So if you want to go see the comedy show in the park, that's this Friday. Follow Ben Bankus at Ben Bankus on Instagram or Twitter or Facebook. Message him. He'll tell you the location of our protest. If you want to see me, I'll be there this Friday. And remember, next Wednesday, we'll be in studio. And tomorrow will be the premiere of our first interview with Pretty Upala. She's great. She's absolutely fantastic. You should read her article. It's on my Facebook page. I put it on Twitter as well. It is such an amazing article on China and Pakistan and India. So check her out too. But we'll be excited for that interview tomorrow because a lot of great topics to talk with her. And she's brilliant. And I'm really looking forward to it. So same bat time, same bat place. See you next Wednesday.